The Tuesday morning light in early October lay thin over Springfield, the kind of pale sun that looks warm from a distance and turns cold the moment it touches skin. Carol Bennett stepped out of the rideshare at the curb, thanked the driver with a tired nod, and stood a moment on the sidewalk in front of the 2-story yellow house she had bought with 40 years of aching hands. The funeral dress still held the faint scent of lilies from Grace's service. Her feet ached in sensible black shoes. She wanted a cup of tea, silence, maybe the comfort of the creaking stair that had always greeted her like a familiar voice. She unlatched the front gate. The hinge squealed. She pushed it open and stopped breathing. Her life was in the yard. Boxes slumped open like gutted animals. Shirts she had folded for decades lay flung across damp grass. Photo frames with spidered glass reflected a chopped-up sky. A cardigan she knitted after her husband died hung from the bougainvillea vine like a flag. One box wore a strip of blue painter's tape and a word written with cheerful certainty, trash. For a beat, the world made no sound. Then the porch door clicked, and Amber appeared with a hand on the small of her back, the other cradling a tumbler of iced water. She was radiant and composed. The kind of composed that photographs, well, her maternity sweater skimming a neat curve. "We decided to clear out old things," she said, as if announcing a sale at the mall. The word old slid through the air and settled on everything Carol could name. Old photos, old coats, old woman. "Where is Michael?" Carol asked. Her voice surprised her, thin, careful, as if one wrong note would shatter it. "Working," Amber said, eyes moving over the boxes like a supervisor. "He'll be home late. We figured it's a good time to get the nursery ready. Doctor says I shouldn't be around dust." She sipped her water and smiled. "You understand." Carol stepped past a box of kitchen towels and picked up a frame face down in the grass. Grace's grin looked up at her through a filament of cracked glass. The two of them in borrowed hats at a 4th of July picnic, smoke from a grill blurring the background. She brushed a blade of grass from the image with the tip of her thumb. "Those are my things," she said. "They were taking up space," Amber answered brightly. "The baby needs a room upstairs. We've already moved some items. And we cleared your closet to make room for the dresser." She gestured toward the open door, where a roll of contractor bags stood like sentries. "Your room," Carol said, hearing how small the word sounded. "My room." "Temporarily," Amber said as if offering a favor. "We set you up downstairs. The storage room has space if you keep it tidy. There's an outlet for a lamp. It'll be cozy." The word landed like a stone. Cozy. Carol's hand found the porch rail. Beneath the gloss paint, she could still feel the shallow grooves she sanded herself the summer after she signed the deed. A summer of sunburned forearms and paychecks stretched until they sang. She looked at the carpet of her history and then at the woman on her porch who called it clutter. Her chest didn't heave. Nothing rose. The sorrow, heavy and familiar since the hospice call, sat perfectly still inside her, a lake caught by first frost. "I will bring these in," she said. "Please don't. The nursery plan is delicate. We're on a schedule." Amber glanced at her watch and took another drink. "We should avoid stress, Carol. It isn't good for the baby." Twilight leaned forward through the trees as evening came early, the way it does in October when shadows sharpen and sweep across lawns. The movers, Amber's cousins, Carol realized, arrived in a pickup to collect the donate pile. Someone laughed when a lid slipped and a tangle of yarn fell out. Carol didn't correct them when they mispronounced her last name. She watched until the sound of boxes scraping cardboard drowned out thought. Then she carried 3 framed photos, a leather-bound notebook and a tea tin inside. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and new paint. She climbed one step, then stopped. Fresh tape crossed her old door in an X. "We'll peel it later," Amber called from the hall. "Basement's open." The storage room held a cot. A thin pillow and a single outlet. Damp chalked the cinder block. An extension cord wound around a concrete support, like a vine. Somewhere upstairs. The faucet ran and then cut off. A cupboard door, shut decisively. On the cot, the thin mattress found every bone in her back. She lay still, eyes open to the joists and pipes above, and listened to the house speak in new voices. Humiliation came first, hot and precise. Then it cooled into something denser, like metal left in night air. Beneath it, the slow, steady sound of her own breath began to feel like counting. She saw Grace's picture again, the crack through her sister's laugh. She saw her husband's hands, the day they chose yellow paint, arguing gently about shades. She saw a box marked trash and pictured the letters peeling, one by one from the tape. The sorrow didn't leave. It shifted. It cleared just enough space for a thought to step forward and stand up straight. Carol reached for her purse, found her phone by feel, scrolled to a name that had not been needed in years, and let her thumb rest there a heartbeat. She pictured the upstairs room, the tape on her door, the word old in a young woman's mouth. Then she tapped the screen, lifted the phone to her ear, and when the line connected, she kept her voice low, steady, and utterly awake. She reached for her phone, opened her lawyer's contact, and whispered, "Samuel, it's time we cleaned house for real." The basement smelled of mildew and old cotton, a sour heaviness that clung to Carol's throat no matter how shallowly she breathed. A single bulb hung from a wire above her cot, its glow small and trembling, the kind of light that makes shadows look alive. She lay on her back, staring at the joists, her fingers tracing the seam of the blanket sheet once bought for Michael's dorm room. Each hum from the furnace upstairs reminded her that the house was still hers, even if the rooms above no longer belonged to her life. Sleep didn't come. Her mind drifted through years that smelled of bleach and waxed floors, offices scrubbed before dawn, motel bathrooms disinfected until her knees ached. Nights she skipped dinner so her kids could have shoes that fit. Every dollar she had ever saved had built this house. Every memory inside it was a thread from her hands. Now she was a guest beneath it. Sometime near dawn she heard a car door. Then the muffled thud of Michael's steps across the porch. For a moment she thought he might come down, ask how she was, notice that the basement was damp and cold. But hours passed before she heard the upstairs faucet, the scrape of a chair, a voice on the phone, his voice low, practical, talking about invoices, schedules, deadlines. By the time sunlight crept through the narrow window, Carol had brewed instant coffee in a chipped mug. She climbed the stairs slowly, her knees stiff, and stopped when she saw him in the kitchen. Michael's shoulders were broader than she remembered. His hair thinned at the temples. He looked like a man who had practiced exhaustion until it felt natural. "Michael," she said quietly. He turned, startled, the phone still in his hand. "Mom, you shouldn't sneak up like that." "I live here," she answered. The words came out simple, factual, but he winced anyway. He set the phone down, rubbed his face. "Please, Mom, not this morning." "Not what?" "Not a fight. Amber's been emotional lately. The doctor said stress isn't good for the baby." Carol blinked at him. "Stress," she repeated. "You threw your mother into the basement, Michael." His eyes shifted to the counter, where a bowl of fruit sat too neatly arranged. "It's temporary," he said. "Once things settle, we'll figure something out. You know Amber just wants everything ready before the baby comes." The tone was practiced, soft, weary, meant to end the conversation before it began. Carol saw her son inside that voice, the boy who once hugged her knees after nightmares, who promised at 16 he'd buy her a mansion someday. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who avoided her eyes and spoke like a hostage negotiating peace. She wanted to ask if he remembered their first winter here, when the furnace broke and they slept in the living room under one blanket, laughing about the campfire of bills they burned to stay warm. But she only said, You could have called me first. He nodded vaguely, already moving toward the door. I'm late. Please, just try to keep things calm. The door closed. Footsteps faded. Silence returned, thick, accusatory. Carol sat at the kitchen table, the one piece of furniture still hers. She reached for her notebook. The same ledger she'd kept for decades. Columns of figures in careful handwriting. Every bill, every deposit, a lifetime of neatness. She flipped to the last page. The total didn't make sense. She frowned, checked again. Then she reached for her reading glasses and read each number twice. The balance had fallen by more than half. Her pulse kicked. The pen slipped from her fingers. She stood, opened her purse, found her bank card, and sat back down at the computer on the counter. The login screen blinked up at her, pale blue against the morning light. Her hands shook as she typed the password. When the numbers appeared, the world narrowed to the screen. Transaction after transaction rolled down the list. Baby boutique, designer store, spa resort, and new SUV lease. None of them hers. Her breath caught, not in anger yet, but in disbelief, so deep it felt like vertigo. The sound of the refrigerator's motor filled the room. Upstairs, water began to run again. Amber was taking her morning shower. Carol sat still, her eyes tracing the digits that marked the last withdrawal. The numbers blurred on the screen. But the truth was sharp enough. Over $30,000 had vanished. The next morning, Springfield woke under a thin fog that made everything look quieter than it was. Carol walked through it toward the brick building of Springfield Community Bank, her scarf pulled close around her throat. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and printer toner. The carpet swallowed sound. A young teller directed her to a glass cubicle where a small sign read manager, Daniel Keene. He rose when she entered, smiling with the easy patience of someone used to other people's confusion. Good morning, Mrs. Bennett. How can we help you today? I need to check some recent withdrawals, she said, placing her worn leather purse on the desk. There are transactions I don't recognize. He nodded, took her ID, and tapped on his keyboard. The monitor's light reflected in his glasses. All right, ma'am. I'm seeing several transfers over the past few months. Furniture stores, boutiques, a spa in Chicago, some nursery items. These were all completed through joint access. Carol blinked. Joint access? I don't have a joint account. Mr. Keene turned the monitor slightly so she could see. It appears your son, Michael Bennett, was added as a secondary user last year. That allows shared authorization for household expenses. Her stomach tightened. And his wife. If he had her listed as a household member, yes. Technically, anyone with the secondary card or online credentials could make withdrawals. For a moment, Carol simply stared at the screen. Rows of numbers glowed like neat little wounds. Boutique names she didn't know. A payment labeled Spa Retreat, Lake Geneva. Another for Baby Haven Premium Stroller. Every purchase was a sentence she hadn't written. Mr. Keene cleared his throat softly. Would you like me to print a statement for your records? Yes, please. The printer hummed. Carol's fingers pressed into her knees to keep them still. She thanked him, signed a verification slip, and stepped outside, clutching the thin sheaf of paper. The sun had burned through the fog, but the air still bit. She looked down the street where red and orange leaves gathered in gutters and thought how strange it was that a whole season could change without anyone asking your permission. By the time she reached her block, the anger had begun to form, a slow, steady heat beneath her ribs. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that waits. Martha Coleman was trimming her front hedge when Carol stopped at the fence. The older woman straightened, wiped her hands on her gardening apron, and smiled. Carol, honey, you're back. I was so sorry to hear about Grace. How are you holding up? I've been better, Carol said honestly. She hesitated, then added, Martha, Did you happen to see anyone moving furniture from my house lately? Martha's expression shifted. Well, now that you mention it, a couple of weeks ago, I saw Amber's cousins loading a truck. Figured you'd finally decided to get rid of that big dining set. They looked like they were having a time with it. Carol felt the ground tilt. My husband built that table, she whispered. Martha frowned. Oh dear. I am sorry, Carol. I assumed. Well, it looked like family business. It was, Carol said, though her voice came out thin. Just not the kind that belongs in daylight. She thanked Martha, promised to stop by for coffee sometime, and walked the rest of the way home slowly, carrying the printout against her chest as if it were fragile. Inside the yard, the last of her trash boxes still leaned near the porch. A chair leg poked from one, the varnish dulled by dew. She touched it, her fingertips catching on a splinter. For a moment, she let herself see it clearly. Amber's smug smile, Michael's averted eyes. Her husband's hands, shaping that same wood long ago in the garage that smelled of sawdust and pipe smoke. The paper in her hand trembled, but not from weakness. It was a physical thing now, proof of betrayal that had a signature and a timestamp. Proof that her absence upstairs had already been filled with new furniture, new colors, new life that cost her everything. The wind lifted a few leaves from the porch rail and carried them toward the curb. Carol watched them go, her jaw tightening. They weren't just taking her money, they were erasing her existence. The next morning, downtown Springfield hummed with early traffic and the clatter of coffee cups. Carol climbed the stone steps to the building that housed Reed and Associates, gripping the handrail as the wind pulled at her coat. The office looked the same as it had the last time she'd been here, a framed certificate on the wall, a smell of lemon polish, a secretary with a voice soft as paper. She hadn't needed Samuel Reed in years, not since he helped her settle her husband's estate. Back then, she'd thanked him with a pie. Now, she came with evidence of betrayal folded neatly in her purse. Mrs. Bennett, the secretary said with a smile. He'll see you right away. Samuel rose when Carol entered. His hair had gone grayer, but the eyes behind the glasses were the same kind blue that always made her feel steadier than she was. Carol, he said warmly, offering his hand. I was sorry to hear about Grace. How have you been holding up? Carol sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. I've had better weeks. She unfolded the printed bank statement, smoothing its creases with care. I need your help again, Sam. This time, it's about my son. He took the papers, glanced over them, then looked up. Joint account misuse? She nodded. And more than that, they've moved me into the basement, threw my things into the yard. There, she swallowed, turning my bedroom into a nursery. Samuel exhaled slowly, scanning the list of transactions. You're saying Amber had access? She did. Through Michael. He leaned back, thoughtful. You've still got the property deed at home? Yes. In my safe. Good, he said. Let's start there. He reached for a folder, pulled out a copy of the deed from his files, and pointed to the bottom of the page. Your husband left full ownership to you. There's no transfer of title to Michael, not even a pending one. He must have told Amber something different. The words sank into her like a slow, clean breath. So the house is still mine. Every nail of it, Samuel said. They have no legal claim. If they're living there without your consent, that's what Illinois law calls a tenancy at will. You can revoke it any time. Carol sat back. The knot in her chest loosened, just slightly. So what do I do? First, secure your finances. Change every password. Cancel the secondary cards. And open a new account in your name only. Second, document everything. Photos of your belongings in the yard. Your living conditions in the basement. Anything that shows mistreatment. Third, if they refuse to vacate, we'll file a formal eviction notice. I'll handle the paperwork. She stared at the manila folder between them. "Evict my own son," she murmured. Samuel's voice gentled. "Sometimes justice means protecting yourself from the people you love most." She looked down at her hands. The skin was thin, the veins mapped like rivers. Once those same hands had wiped fevers, signed field trip slips, packed lunches, saved dollars. The idea of using them now to serve a notice on her child felt like betrayal in reverse. Samuel folded the statement and handed it back. "You don't have to decide this minute. But Carol, don't wait too long. The longer you let them stay, the more they'll believe it's theirs." Carol nodded, sliding the paper into her purse. "I understand." He walked her to the door. "You've always been fair, Carol. Fair and careful. You'll do what's right." Outside, the city had brightened. Morning light flashed off car roofs and shop windows, off puddles that caught the blue of the sky. Carol stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the scent of wet concrete and roasted coffee from the cafe across the street. Relief unfurled in her chest, fragile but real. Justice, she realized, had never left her side. It had just been waiting for her to stand up again. She tightened her grip on her purse, straightened her shoulders, and stepped into the sunlight. As she left his office, the morning sun hit her face. For the first time in years, she didn't lower her eyes. 2 evenings later, the Bennett's dining room glowed under the chandelier, the same one Carol had chosen years ago at a clearance sale. Its light had once meant warmth. Now it cast hard reflections across polished glass and strained faces. The table was set for 6. Amber had insisted on a family dinner, and Carol had agreed. Though she knew this wasn't about reconciliation, it was a presentation. Thomas and Elaine Brooks arrived first, carrying the crisp air of people accustomed to getting their way. Thomas shook Carol's hand with the courtesy one gives to an employee. Elaine offered a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael poured wine for them, his movements stiff, rehearsed. Amber, glowing in a cream maternity dress, floated between kitchen and table like a hostess auditioning for approval. Dinner began with awkward pleasantries, whether nursery colors, Springfield's, rising property taxes. Carol cut her chicken slowly, the sound of silverware loud in the silence between sentences. She could feel Amber's eyes flick toward her every few minutes, checking for compliance. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat. "Amber and Michael have been telling us how busy things have been," he said, "and we thought maybe we could help find a solution for everyone's comfort." Elaine leaned forward, her pearl earrings swaying. "Carol, dear, you've had such a full life. Wouldn't it be nice to relax? There are wonderful assisted living communities near Lake Springfield. Private rooms, daily meals, people your age to talk to. You'd have company instead of staying in that basement." The word basement dropped like a pebble in still water. Carol's knife paused mid-cut. Amber smiled, gentle and polished. "Mom, it's not that we don't want you here," she said sweetly. "It's just you've done your part. It's our turn now. You can rest, enjoy life, maybe join some classes. I mean, the baby needs space to grow." Michael's eyes darted between them, a silent plea for peace. Carol set her knife down carefully, folded her napkin, and met Amber's gaze. "So I'm a burden now." Amber's smile stiffened. "Please don't take it that way. We're just trying to be practical." "Practical," Carol repeated. "Practical is throwing your mother's life into the yard." The silence cracked. Amber's parents exchanged looks. Michael rubbed his temples. Amber straightened, her tone sharpening. "We've all been under stress. You keep bringing up the past. This is our home now. You can't expect." Carol's voice cut through, calm and clear. "You're living in my house." The words landed heavy. For a full second, no one moved. Thomas blinked. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Carol reached into her purse and placed a folded document on the table. "The deed," she said, "still under my name. Always has been. Michael never filed the transfer." Michael's face drained of color. "Mom." Elaine's fork clattered against her plate. "You mean this isn't—" Amber stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. "You're lying," she said, her voice breaking. Michael tried to speak, but the truth was already spilling from his silence. I never got around to it," he muttered. "We were waiting until after the baby." Amber turned on him, eyes blazing. "You told me it was ours. You said she signed it over." "Amber," Thomas warned softly, but she was already shaking, her breath coming fast. Carol didn't rise, didn't shout. She only watched the young couple unravel, their perfect narrative collapsing under the weight of ink and omission. Amber grabbed her purse, muttering curses as she stormed toward the door. "You can both figure this out," she snapped at her husband. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the chandelier. Michael sank into his chair, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, I'm sorry. I just wanted peace." "There's no peace built on lies," Carol said quietly. The Brooks couple made a hasty exit, mumbling excuses about traffic. The house fell silent again, but it was a different silence now, one that belonged to Carol. Later that night, she sat on the edge of her cot in the basement, listening to the wind move through the vents. The walls were still gray, the air still damp, but something had shifted above her. The truth had weight, and it was finally hers again. That night, Carol didn't sleep, but for the first time, she didn't cry either. The following morning, the rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low over downtown Springfield. Carol arrived early at Samuel Reed's office, the leather folder pressed tight under her arm. Through the glass, she saw Michael already sitting across from Samuel's desk, his posture small, his eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. He rose when she entered, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. "Mom," he said, finally, voice frayed. "Please, can we talk before?" Samuel looked up from his notes. "I thought it best we discuss everything together." He gestured for Carol to sit. "I reviewed the documentation. Mrs. Bennett, your ownership is unquestionable." "Mr. Bennett," he added, glancing at Michael. "You're aware of that now, I assume?" Michael nodded, his shoulders sinking. "Yes. I messed up. I let things get out of control. Amber kept saying it was all temporary, just until the baby. I thought I could fix it before it came to this." Carol's voice was even, almost detached. "You didn't fix it. You chose to ignore it." He flinched, then looked at her with eyes that still held the boy she remembered. "I am sorry, Mom. I really am. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it." Samuel folded his hands. "That's what we're here to settle. Mrs. Bennett has a proposal." Carol opened her folder and slid 2 documents across the table. "You and Amber will sign a rental agreement for the house," she said. "Starting this month, you'll pay rent at fair market value. Half of it will go toward repaying the money that was taken from my account. You'll return all of it, plus interest, over the next 4 years." Michael's mouth opened, closed again. "For years." "You spent my lifetime savings," Carol said. "It seems fair to buy them back with time." The door opened abruptly. Amber appeared, her coat still damp from the drizzle outside. "You had this meeting without me?" she said, glaring at Michael before turning to Carol. "You think you can just make rules? You're out of your mind." "Mrs. Bennett isn't making rules," Samuel said calmly. "She's exercising her rights as property owner and primary account holder. If you refuse, we'll proceed with an eviction notice and a civil claim for financial fraud." Amber's expression flickered, fear under fury. "You wouldn't do that to your own family," she said to Carol. "I already did," Carol replied softly. "You just didn't notice." Amber's jaw tightened. "You can't evict a pregnant woman." "I'm not evicting you," Carol said. "I'm asking you to pay for what you've taken. That includes respect." Samuel slid the documents toward her. You can review these before signing, but I recommend you don't delay. A refusal would escalate things legally. Amber stared down at the papers. Her hand trembled as she skimmed the clauses: monthly payment schedule, interest rate, termination of tenancy upon non-payment. This is ridiculous, she muttered. We don't have that kind of money. Michael's voice was quiet. We'll make it work. Amber's head snapped toward him. You can't be serious. He met her gaze without blinking. I am. I'm done lying. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Amber took the pen Samuel laid out for her. She hesitated, her chest rising and falling fast. The pen scratched against paper, carving her name into a contract she could no longer escape. When she finished, she pushed it back hard enough to make the pen roll off the desk. Samuel caught it before it hit the floor. We'll notarize this today, he said evenly. Amber turned to Carol, eyes burning. You think this makes you a hero? You'll die alone in that basement. Carol rose, calm and steady. Maybe, she said, but not ashamed. Amber's cheeks flushed scarlet. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the glass in the frame rattled. Michael stayed seated, silent. The air in the room carried the sharp scent of ink and rain-soaked wool. Samuel gathered the documents into a folder. It's done, he said quietly. Carol nodded, eyes following the closed door. Not quite, she murmured, but it's a start. As Amber threw the pen onto the desk, Carol smiled faintly. From now on, she said, we're all just tenants of our choices. 3 days later, evening crept quietly over Springfield, turning the neighborhood gold and gray. Carol sat in the small living room, surrounded by silence that felt heavier than usual. The paperwork from Samuel's office lay on the coffee table, a neat stack of justice she'd fought for but couldn't bring herself to celebrate. Her hands, still steady in the morning, now trembled as she reached for a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The exhaustion had seeped into her bones, an ache not from age, but from too much holding herself together. Upstairs, the faint sound of movement echoed through the ceiling. Amber packing, Michael pacing. Every footstep reminded Carol that even victory had a cost. She pressed her fingers against her temple, trying to steady her breathing. The air felt too thick, too close. She stood, meaning to fetch her heart medication. But the world tilted slightly under her feet. The room dimmed at the edges. Pain bloomed across her chest, sharp and sudden, like a fist closing around her heart. The mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Her knees buckled. She tried to call out, but the sound died in her throat. Outside, Martha Coleman was collecting her mail when she heard the crash. The curtains in Carol's window swayed, then went still. Martha hurried across the yard, knocked once, then pushed the door open when no answer came. Carol! She found her collapsed near the sofa, her hand still clutching her cardigan. Martha knelt beside her, panic tightening her breath. She fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling. My neighbor's not breathing right. Please send help fast. Within minutes, the wail of sirens split the quiet street. Paramedics burst in, efficient and calm, their voices layered over the hum of medical monitors. Blood pressure's low. She's conscious but fading. They lifted Carol gently onto a stretcher, the oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. When the ambulance doors closed, Martha stood frozen on the curb, clutching her robe against the cold. The red lights flashed against the yellow siding of Carol's house, the house she had fought so hard to keep, and then disappeared into the night. At Springfield Memorial Hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and rain. Nurses moved quickly around her, attaching lines and monitors, voices steady but urgent. 78 pulse, irregular rhythm. Mild myocardial infarction. Get Dr. Lambert. Carol drifted in and out of awareness, flashes of light and movement blurring together. When she finally woke, her throat was dry, and a soft beeping filled the room. She blinked at the white ceiling, disoriented, until she saw two familiar figures by the window. Mom. Emily's voice broke on the word. She rushed forward, gripping Carol's hand. Jason stood behind her, jaw tight, his eyes rimmed red. "We got here as soon as we could," he said. "Why didn't anyone call us sooner?" Carol tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. "You're here. That's enough." Emily shook her head. "Michael should have been here first. Where is he?" Carol looked away. "At home, I suppose. Or what used to be home." Jason's anger simmered under his breath. "He left you alone after everything? Unbelievable." Carol squeezed his hand weakly. "Don't hate him, Jason. He's already lost more than he knows." The door opened, and Dr. Lambert stepped in, clipboard in hand. He was middle-aged, calm-eyed, the kind of man who spoke softly but left no room for argument. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, "you were lucky. It was a mild heart attack. But your heart's under strain. You need complete rest, both physical and emotional." He glanced at Emily and Jason. "No stress triggers. No confrontations. Your mother needs a calm environment if she's going to heal." Carol nodded faintly. "I understand." As the doctor adjusted her for, his voice softened. "You'll need peace," he said. "Sometimes peace means distance." 2 months later, spring returned to Springfield as if the city itself had exhaled after a long breath. The air smelled of rain and thawed earth. The trees along Lincoln Park wore a soft, green haze of new leaves. Carol Bennett lived just a few blocks away now, in a modest one-bedroom apartment with pale yellow walls and wide windows that caught the morning sun. It wasn't large, but it was hers, clean, warm, and quiet in a way the old house had not been for years. Emily and Jason had driven down on weekends to help her settle in. The apartment filled with the scent of fresh paint and coffee, laughter echoing as they argued gently over curtain colors. They'd brought her favorite quilt from storage, a few framed photos, and a set of ceramic mugs Grace had once given her. The living room, though small, held more peace than the entire Bennett house ever had. "Mom, you should get some plants," Emily had said one afternoon, arranging books on the low shelf. "Something to take care of that isn't people." Now, 2 months later, Carol's windowsill was lined with green, basil, lavender, a fern that refused to die. Each morning, she watered them, then walked to the Lincoln Park branch library where she volunteered 3 days a week. She shelved books, read to children during story hour, and helped elderly patrons fill out online forms they didn't understand. The work was simple, but it made her feel useful again. One Tuesday afternoon, as she finished alphabetizing a shelf of mystery novels, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Samuel Reed. "Samuel," she greeted warmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I thought you'd want an update," he said. "Michael's first repayment went through last week, right on schedule. It looks like he's taking this seriously." Carol smiled faintly. "That's good to hear." He hesitated before continuing. "Amber has taken a part-time job at a cosmetics counter downtown. She refused to sign the acknowledgement receipt I mailed her, but that's her choice. The payments are under Michael's name alone." Carol nodded, though he couldn't see it. "She's angry. I expected that." "You're handling this remarkably well," he said gently. "I'm tired of anger," she replied. "It costs too much." After hanging up, she sat for a moment in the quiet library, watching dust dance in the sunlight. There was no triumph in her heart, just a soft, steady calm. Justice, she'd learned, didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, "Enough." That evening, as she brewed tea in her small kitchen, a knock came at the door. When she opened it, Michael stood there. He looked thinner, the sharp lines of guilt etched deeper into his face. His hands were shoved in his jacket pockets, and for a moment he didn't meet her eyes. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile. Michael looked around the modest space, the potted plants, the neat shelves, the soft lamplight inside. "You made this place look nice," he said. "It's peaceful," she replied. "That's all I wanted." He nodded slowly, then said, "I came to say I'm sorry. Not just for the money. For all of it. For letting her treat you like that. For standing by when I should have stood up." Carol studied him for a long moment. "Are you still with her?" He hesitated. "Yes. We're working through things. I'm trying to be better." She looked down at her tea, then back at him. "I'll believe it when I see it." Michael's lips parted, but no words came. He nodded once, eyes glistening. "That's fair," he whispered. He set his mug down, glanced around the little apartment one last time, then moved toward the door. When it closed behind him, Carol didn't follow him to the window, didn't watch him disappear down the hallway. The silence that remained wasn't lonely, it was her own. He left without an answer, but for once, Carol didn't watch him go. The cafe was half empty that afternoon, filled with the soft murmur of conversations and the hiss of steaming milk. Carol sat by the window, her cane resting against the table, a cup of cappuccino cooling beside her. Outside, the maple trees along the sidewalk were turning gold again. Another October, another beginning. She had started to like coming here on quiet afternoons, when the world seemed to exhale. Her phone buzzed, breaking the stillness. It was Martha. "Carol," her friend said. Voice low. "I just spoke with someone you might want to hear from. Elaine Brooks, Amber's mother. She asked if she could meet you, said it's important." Carol's first instinct was to refuse, but something in Martha's tone, weary, cautious, made her agree. "Tell her I'll be at Cafe Lincoln. 2:30. Half an hour later, the bell above the door jingled. Elaine Brooks stepped in, looking smaller than Carol remembered. Her pearls were gone, her posture less proud. She spotted Carol, hesitated, then approached. "Mrs. Bennett," she said quietly, sliding into the seat opposite. "Thank you for seeing me." Carol gave a polite nod. "Coffee?" Elaine shook her head. Her hands trembled as she folded them on the table. "I owe you an apology. I should have spoken sooner, but I didn't know how." Carol said nothing, only waited. Elaine's eyes darted toward the window. "Amber hasn't told you everything," she began. "When she met Michael, she wasn't just looking for love. She was looking for a way out." Carol's fingers tightened around her cup, but her face remained calm. "Out of what?" "Debt," Elaine whispered. "My husband made terrible investments before he died. We lost nearly everything, the house, the savings. Amber was angry, desperate. When she met your son, she saw a chance to start over. She told me she'd marry him, and that your home would solve everything." The words settled heavy in the air, though Carol felt strangely detached, as if listening to a story that no longer belonged to her life. Elaine's voice quivered. "I tried to stop her. I told her deception never lasts. But she wouldn't listen. And now," she looked down at her wedding band, turning it slowly, "now she won't even speak to me." Carol stirred her coffee, watching the swirl of cream dissolve into brown. "So it wasn't just greed," she said quietly. "It was fear." Elaine nodded, tears glinting in the corners of her eyes. She wanted security, not cruelty, but she became cruel to get it. They sat in silence for a long time, two women on opposite ends of the same storm. Carol reached for her purse, placed a few dollars on the table, and stood. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. Elaine reached out, her voice cracking. "I hope one day she realizes what she lost." Carol gave a faint, wistful smile. "We all do eventually." Outside, the air was cool and crisp. The sun dipped low, spilling amber light over the street. Carol adjusted her scarf, stepped onto the sidewalk, and began her slow walk home. The leaves danced around her cane, spinning like tiny pieces of gold. For the first time in years, she felt light, not because she won, but because she had nothing left to lose.